To be America's enemy may be dangerous, but to be America's friend is fatal. These words, often attributed to Henry Kissinger, echo today with chilling resonance. For decades, Washington has presented itself as a shield for its allies. But as US tensions with Beijing intensify, even America's closest friends are discovering that protection comes at a price. The resignation of Japan's Prime Minister, who's been forced out after a catastrophic deal which is tied too closely to US demands, amongst other things, is just the latest warning sign. Far from shielding Tokyo, the United States left it cornered, burdened with economic concessions the country gave to the United States. The Liberal Democratic Party was hounded by a domestic backlash and has stripped the country of political stability. For others watching, including China, this is proof that Washington's partnerships are fragile. The deal that toppled Tokyo's leadership was supposed to be simple. Instead, it turned into a big disaster. $550 billion of Japanese money to be spent as per Americans' own will. The US will decide what projects will be or not. The Japanese investor will only get a 10% of return, and the United States will get the other 90%. Japan is expected to shoulder costs it cannot afford, and at the expense of its own sovereignty. The deal was worse than anything that could have been imposed even after World War II, at the height of Japan's humiliation or subjugation. They didn't get a deal like this. The same is transpiring with the South Koreans' trade deal, in which they were expected to give the Americans $350 billion in exchange for trading with the United States in essence. As the 300 temporary technicians were apprehended from the Hyundai factory and sent back on a plane chartered for them in handcuffs, when the South Koreans saw the images on their screens, they grew ballistic. And they're asking questions about the alliance that they have with the United States. China, of course, is watching all of this. China is playing the long game. From the soil of America's heartland to the silicon of its tech giants, it's playing the game of attrition, using every bushel, every chip, every deal to shift the balance of power. Let's dive in deeper and look at the two factors that China currently has in its hands. Now, just before I jump into China's attrition war, the United States has just announced that an agreement has been made on the sale of TikTok, with the final go-ahead to occur after President Trump's call to President Xi on Friday. No details have been released yet, including on whether and how much share Chinese company will still hold, and even more importantly, how much of TikTok's powerful algorithm they will be giving away to any new American buyer. And the agreement, which was reached as part of the trade talks, has to also be approved by the United States Congress as well, since it passed the 2024 law requiring ByteDance to divest. Oracle is being speculated as one of the potential players that may acquire at least some share in the new business model. Oracle already hosts TikTok's user data. President Trump is a big fan of TikTok and has been resistant to the idea of banning the social media app, which over 170 million Americans use. He has an account which has over 15 million followers alone. But more details on that when they do come out. Right now, the United States and China are in the midst of round 3 of their trade talks, this time in Madrid. And China just upped the ante. It's playing hardball with the United States, this time by turning towards Silicon Valley, where one of America's most powerful companies stands exposed, Nvidia, the titan of graphic chips and artificial intelligence. It's not only the beating heart of the United States' technological supremacy, its chips are also the trump card that the United States administrations have been withholding from China to delay its progress in artificial intelligence. Earlier this year, China had to choke off the supply of rare earth materials that are critical in manufacturing cars, electronics, and defense equipment, which led to an outcry from American businesses forcing the Trump administration to cave in to Chinese demands and to loosen some controls on the export of tech products to China. Now, as expected, chips are also under discussion during these trade talks as well. This time, it's Nvidia's higher performance Blackwell type chip that is more advanced than the H20 chip. But turning the tables, China's antitrust regulatory authority has just announced that it will do what it says is a further investigation into whether Nvidia is meeting the conditions it agreed to when China gave it the conditional approval to go ahead with its $6.5 billion high-profile merger with an Israeli chip designer company called Mellanox Technologies in 2020. Now, that merger cemented Nvidia's dominance in the field. Now, in 2025, Beijing just reopened that chapter. The initial investigation was launched in December last year, 2024. Under the guise of a regulatory review, Chinese officials have announced that they're re-examining Nvidia's deal, saying that it's violated the conditions set out under the conditional approval, and it's violated the country's anti-monopoly law, marking the latest hit for the United States chip giant. The message is clear. United States can no longer expand globally without Beijing's permission. Now, this has occurred as chips are being discussed during those trade talks in Madrid. China wants to give the United States message. The United States has gone on the back foot, with the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying that the announcement was poor timing. This announcement from China's State Administration for Market Regulation was obviously deliberately timed to give China clout while trade talks are ongoing. It was also in response to the Trump administration's decision on Friday to place 23 Chinese companies on a US trade blacklist. The Chinese are indicating they're not going to submit lightly to any export controls whenever the United States government feels like imposing them. Under the terms outlined in its 2020 conditional approval, one of those terms was that Nvidia would continue to supply the Chinese market with GPU accelerators, which are used in computing. Now, setting terms is a standard request to ensure that any company that's merging will not use its monopoly position or its dominant position post-merger to reduce the quantity of goods supplied or to hike up prices in any particular market. Companies obviously promise that they won't do so that their merger can go ahead. Now, the problem in this case is that since 2020, and nothing to do with the merger, Nvidia has been forced to end sales of its most advanced accelerators due to United States government's export controls, which were implemented by the administration of the former President Joe Biden. So technically, Nvidia has not delivered on its promise, and the Chinese hold a trump card where they can penalize Nvidia under their antitrust law. Fines of between 1 to 10% of any company's annual sales from the previous year. China generated around $17 billion of revenue for Nvidia in that last fiscal year. It's around 13% of its sales. And while this legal process now is going to drag on, another tactic has also emerged from the Chinese: the shadow ban. Chinese state-backed companies, once Nvidia's most loyal buyers, have been quietly instructed to freeze orders and buy local. Procurement has been slowed down, contracts have vanished, and the Chinese competitors, such as Huawei and Alibaba, are fast gaining ground. Last month, China's cyberspace regulator also summoned Nvidia representatives to explain whether the H20 chip, which Nvidia specifically made for China, posed any backdoor security risks that could affect Chinese user data and privacy. That put Jensen Huang on the back foot, claiming that he would never do that. By flaunting possible punishment of Nvidia over an antitrust issue, China is indicating to the United States that it's not going to be making any ridiculous concessions to get Nvidia's products, as it is on that road to self-sufficiency in AI. Basically, what Washington was using as its weapon, Beijing's just flipped the switch. China is now playing hardball in silicon. Yet the fight over silicon is only half the story. China's leverage doesn't end in that Silicon Valley. It reaches deep into the soil of America's Midwest. In the heartland of America, another battleground has emerged: soybeans. For decades, United States farmers have relied on China as their single largest buyer. Each harvest, millions of tons, crossed the Pacific and fed China's livestock, and they fueled America's own agricultural engine. But when trade wars erupted, American soybean fields now lie unharvested or empty as Beijing began to play its own long game. China remains the largest market for the United States agricultural products, but imports of US farm goods have dropped for the second consecutive year, falling to around $30 billion in 2024 from $42 billion in 2022. As the US ups its export controls and tariffs on China, China's retaliated by putting tariffs on US soybeans as well as overall reduction of buying in farm goods from the United States. Nearly a quarter of the more than 4 billion bushels of soybeans that American farmers grow each year are exported to China, which is by far the world's biggest soy importer. The country imported around $13 billion of soybeans from the United States last year, and that's compared to around $2 billion it used to import from the United States over 2 decades ago. Now, China's cut historic deals with Brazil and Argentina, securing new supply chains while loosening its reliance on Iowa and Illinois in the United States. This year, China's not booked any United States soybean purchases for shipment in the fourth quarter, which is typically the key sales period for the United States as freshly harvested supplies reach the market. China's increased its buying from South American countries. It's almost double of last year to record highs as it has moved away from that traditional source, the United States, for soybeans, among other things. The US supplied 12% of China's agricultural imports in 2024. This is down from 20% in 2016. While Brazil supplies now around 22% last year, and this is up from 14% in 2016. So you can see where the numbers have flipped and in whose favor. And this is according to the US customs data itself. This is according to Chinese customs data. And Brazil is now 70% of China's soy imports. It's double what it used to be 15 years ago. Today, the effects are devastating on the US farmer. Prices have collapsed as those silos overflow with those unsold grain. The prolonged absence of Chinese buying is expected to weigh further on the benchmark Chicago soybeans futures, which are already near 5-year lows. Farmers who've taken on crushing debt to survive, and communities which are built on generations of agriculture are hollowing out thanks to US trade policy. US soybean farmers are projected to lose around $100 an acre this year, according to the US federal data itself, and they're looking towards the government to bail them out. In Trump's first administration, the government gave them about $23 billion to farmers in total to compensate for the impact of his trade war the first time round. Now, for Washington, this is more than lost exports. It's a domestic political crisis. Soybeans aren't just crops, they're votes in states like Iowa and Illinois. Every lost shipment to China is another reason why rural America turns on Washington. It's not just India that has an agricultural vote bank, so does the United States. So for Beijing, every diverted shipment is a leverage. By turning soybeans into a weapon, China has shown that the battlefield of US-China rivalry extends not only to the Silicon Valley, but also can extend to the fields of rural America. China's playing hardball in soybeans. So if Nvidia is a warning shot, then the broader tech war is a battlefield itself. Beijing has poured billions of dollars into AI research, into quantum computing and next-generation semiconductors. The goal's not parity, it's dominance. With state subsidies and sprawling industrial policies, China's created an ecosystem that's designed to outpace the United States, and it's on track. And this has been admitted by no other than Jensen Huang himself, who said that China's technology is very, very close, and that China is not behind in artificial intelligence. And he's even said that Huawei is one of the most formidable technology companies in the world. Washington, which is obviously alarmed, has fired back with export controls on advanced chips And these have been criticized on multiple occasions by Huang as well as being self-defeating. So what has the United States also done? They've put pressure on Taiwan's semiconductor giant, TSMC, not to manufacture chips for Chinese companies. All of this is meant to slow Beijing's rise. But in practice, what do the moves do? They're double-edged. When American firms lose market share, like David Sachs says, like Jensen Huang says, China just doubles down and it builds its own. Every sanction becomes an incentive for self-sufficiency, and the last 5 to 7 years have shown this is the result of trade wars and export controls that the United States has done on technology. Now, every blockade is fueling China's determination, and the result is a race where each side is betting the future on innovation. And both of the countries know that whoever's going to control the chips is going to control the 21st century. China's playing hardball in diplomacy. Remember, China's strategy is implementing a diplomatic strategy through the Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing has sunk billions into ports, roads and railways across Africa, Asia and Europe. And these aren't just projects, they're anchors of influence. With every loan and contract, another government is drifting closer to Beijing's orbit. Now, meanwhile, Washington, which is clinging to NATO and its Pacific partnerships, and even under those, Trump, he just kicks them whenever he feels like it. And that's why the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte felt compelled to call him daddy to please him. Increasingly, countries in the global south see China as their partner for the future. China's the one building the infrastructure, investing in resources, and offering alternatives to Western dominance on equal parity or almost equal parity. Even institutions like the United Nations and the World Health Organization are battlegrounds, where Beijing is pushing to reshape global norms and call for multipolarity versus the United States under Trump pushing them away. And behind both soybeans and silicon lies the ultimate weapon: minerals that the United States cannot replace. We know that despite all US attempts, Beijing controls the supply of rare earth minerals, and that they are critical for everything from smartphones to fighter jets. By threatening restrictions, China holds a card that Washington cannot easily counter. America's response has been to decouple, to pull the supply chains back home, to fund the local mining companies. But the truth is unavoidable. Rebuilding supply chain takes years. And watch all those series that I've done on rare earth minerals. I'll leave the link below in the description. So where does this all leave us? In a world where every alliance, every trade route, every chip, every bushel of grain is part of a grand strategy, Beijing's playbook is patient, methodical, and relentless. Washington's response has been reactive, fragmented, and mostly costly to its allies. Think India, think Japan, think South Korea. The resignation of Japan's prime minister, the shadow banning of Nvidia, the collapse of America's soybean markets. To be America's friend is fatal. Kissinger's words remind us that this rivalry is not simply about two nations. It's about the new global order and the type of global order. China's not just playing hardball with the United States. It's rewriting the rules of the game. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Najma Minhas with GVS Deep Dive. Do share with me your thoughts. Have a great day.